The royal ambush. The shimmering expanse of space stretched endlessly, dotted with stars that seemed to wink in the dark void. Princess Lyra sat silently in her private chamber aboard the royal cruiser, her mind racing. Her mission was simple in words but fraught with danger: broker peace with the rebellious faction on the Outer Rim. The galactic Trian Empire was on the brink of collapse, and only she seemed to recognize the importance of diplomacy. As the heir to the throne, it was her responsibility to act, whether her council approved or not. The convoy of sleek Imperial ships glided through the asteroid belt. The captain's voice crackled through the communication system, reassuring the princess. "Your Highness will soon clear the asteroid field. All systems are normal." Lyra stared out the viewport, her reflection merging with the infinite cosmos. Something didn't feel right. She had been restless since they entered this region. It was too quiet, no trade routes, no patrols, and no signs of life. Suddenly, the silence shattered. Unidentified ships approaching. A voice shouted over the intercom. Alarms blared, and the cruiser shook violently as explosions erupted around them. Lyra gripped the edges of her seat as red warning lights bathed the chamber in an ominous glow. "Shields failing. We're under attack." The captain's voice was strained, barely audible over the chaos. Lyra bolted to the bridge, her heart pounding. The large view screen displayed a swarm of enemy ships darting like angry wasps. Their design was jagged and alien, nothing like the Imperial fleet's smooth, metallic curves. Whoever these attackers were, they had come prepared. "Princess, you need to evacuate," the captain urged, his face pale as he turned toward her. "They're targeting you specifically. If you stay here, we're all doomed." "I won't abandon my people," Lyra snapped, her voice firm. But before she could argue further, an explosion rocked the ship, throwing her to the floor. Sparks flew from damaged consoles, and smoke filled the air. The situation was spiraling out of control. Two guards appeared, lifting her to her feet. "We have to move now, Your Highness," one of them insisted. Reluctantly, she allowed them to escort her toward the escape pods. Her thoughts raced as she tried to make sense of the attack. Who would go to such lengths to kill her? The rebels she sought to negotiate with, or perhaps someone closer to home, someone who didn't want peace. Before they could reach the pods, another explosion tore through the corridor. The guards shielded her with their bodies, but the force separated Lyra from them. She stumbled into an adjacent passage, alone and disoriented. Smoke and fire filled the air, and the sound of distant gunfire echoed through the ship. As Lyra struggled to regain her bearings, a shadowy figure appeared at the far end of the corridor. It wasn't one of her guards. The figure wore a sleek, dark suit with a helmet that concealed their face. For a moment, they stood still, as if sizing her up. "Who are you?" Lyra demanded, backing away cautiously. The figure didn't respond. Instead, they raised a small device and activated it. A beam of light shot out, slicing through a nearby bulkhead. The wall crumbled, revealing the void of space beyond. Lyra braced herself, expecting to be sucked out into the vacuum, but the figure tossed a small device onto the ground. It created a shimmering energy barrier, sealing the breach. "Follow me if you want to live," the figure said, their voice distorted through the helmet. Without waiting for a reply, they turned and sprinted toward a small docking hatch. Lyra hesitated for a split second. She didn't trust this stranger, but staying on the ship meant certain death. Gritting her teeth, she ran after them. The docking hatch led to a small battered ship, nothing like the Imperial cruisers she was used to. It looked more like a scavenger's vessel, held together by mismatched panels and exposed wiring. The stranger gestured for her to enter, and she obeyed, her instincts screaming that this was her only chance. The moment she stepped inside, the ship's engines roared to life. The stranger pushed her into a seat and strapped her in before taking the pilot's chair. "Hold on," they said, and without warning, the ship shot forward, dodging debris and enemy fire with astonishing precision. Lyra's breath caught in her throat as she watched the Imperial convoy behind them. Her once mighty fleet was being obliterated, ship by ship. She clenched her fists, anger and helplessness surging within her. "Who are you?" she demanded again, her voice trembling with frustration. "Why did you save me?" The stranger glanced back briefly, their helmet reflecting her frightened face. "You're important," they said cryptically. "More than you realize." Before she could press further, the ship jolted, narrowly avoiding an enemy missile. The stranger's focus returned to the controls as they guided the vessel into hyperspace. In an instant, the chaos outside disappeared, replaced by the swirling blue tunnel of faster-than-light travel. Lyra slumped in her seat, her heart still racing. She was alive, but her questions had only multiplied. Who was this mysterious pilot? And why had they risked everything to save her? The answers would come later, she told herself. For now, survival was all that mattered. The hidden refuge. The hum of the ship's engines was the only sound as Princess Lyra sat in stunned silence. The stars outside blurred into streaks of light as they hurtled through hyperspace. She couldn't stop glancing at the figure in the pilot's chair, the stranger who had pulled her from the jaws of death. Their helmeted head never turned her way, their focus entirely on the controls. "Where are you taking me?" Lyra's voice broke the tense silence. The stranger didn't respond immediately. When they finally spoke, their voice was calm but firm. "Somewhere safe." Lyra wasn't satisfied with the vague answer. Safe from who? The mercenaries, or whoever sent them. The figure didn't answer. Instead, they tapped a few buttons, and the ship lurched, slowing as hyperspace ended abruptly. The blue swirl faded into the inky blackness of normal space, and ahead of them loomed a barren, rocky moon. Its surface was covered in jagged peaks and deep craters, illuminated by the faint glow of a nearby star. The ship descended rapidly, weaving between cliffs and ridges until it reached a hidden crevice barely wide enough to fit the vessel. The stranger guided the ship with unnerving precision, finally landing it inside a concealed hangar carved into the moon's surface. As the engines powered down, Lyra realized how quiet the galaxy felt here, isolated, distant, and utterly foreign. The stranger stood, their tall frame casting a long shadow across the cramped interior. "Come with me." Lyra hesitated. "Why should I trust you? You haven't even told me who you are." The stranger turned to face her, the mirrored visor of their helmet hiding their expression. "Because you're alive right now. And if you stay in this ship, you won't be for long." Before Lyra could argue, the stranger pressed a button near the hatch, and the ramp lowered with a hiss. A gust of cold, metallic-smelling air rushed in, making her shiver. Reluctantly, she followed them out into the cavernous hangar. The space was dimly lit by flickering lights embedded in the rocky walls. Lyra noticed several other ships, all in various states of disrepair, scattered across the hangar floor. It looked like the lair of a scavenger, or perhaps a smuggler. But what struck her most were the signs of advanced technology interwoven with the rough surroundings. Holographic displays flickered beside ancient, rusted machinery. It was as if two worlds had collided here. This place. Lyra trailed off, unsure how to finish her thought. "Home, for now," the stranger said, leading her toward a passage carved into the rock. "Stay close." They passed through winding tunnels lit by faint blue light. Lyra's unease grew with every step. She felt like a prisoner being led deeper into a labyrinth. Her mind raced with possibilities. Was this person a rebel, an enemy spy, or something else entirely? Finally, they entered a central chamber, where the air hummed with the soft buzz of machines. In the center stood a large circular table covered in holographic projections. Star maps, tactical layouts, and encrypted messages floated in midair. Lyra's eyes widened as she recognized some of the symbols: imperial insignias, coded military routes, and data files marked as classified. "Where did you get this?" she demanded, her voice sharp. The stranger ignored her question, removing their gloves to reveal scared but steady hands. "Sit," they said, gesturing to a small chair near the table. Lyra folded her arms, refusing to move. I'm not doing anything until you explain what's going on. Who are you? Why did you save me? The stranger let out a slow breath, as if weighing their words carefully. You can call me Zane. And I saved you because your enemies were closer than you thought. Lyra frowned. Enemies? Do you mean the mercenaries? Zane's helmet tilted slightly, as though studying her reaction. They were hired to kill you, yes, but they were only the first wave. Someone within your empire wants you dead. Lyra's blood ran cold. The thought had crossed her mind before, but hearing it confirmed by this enigmatic figure made it feel more real. That's impossible, she said, though her voice wavered. My council supports me, my father. Your father has enemies, Zane interrupted. And so do you. The empire is fractured, princess. Not everyone agrees with the peace you're trying to negotiate. Lyra opened her mouth to argue but stopped. Zane's words felt uncomfortably true. She had seen the cracks in her father's court, heard the whispers of rebellion even within the palace walls. But how did this stranger know so much? Why should I believe you? She asked, her tone defiant. Zane stepped closer. And for a moment, Lyra thought they might finally remove the helmet. But instead, they pointed to the holographic map. Because I have proof. And because if you don't, you won't survive long enough to make that choice. Lyra stared at the map, her heart pounding. The weight of the situation settled over her like a crushing tide. She was far from home, surrounded by uncertainty, and now forced to rely on someone who refused to show their face. But deep down, she knew she didn't have a choice. Fine, she said finally, her voice firm. Show me. Zane nodded, their helmet reflecting the flickering light of the holograms. Then listen carefully, princess. Your survival depends on it. The mysterious ally. The stillness of the hidden refuge weighed heavily on Princess Lyra as she sat at the edge of her small cot. The chamber Zane had led her to was modest. Bare walls, a single light panel overhead, and a narrow view of the hangar below through a reinforced window. She traced her fingers over a piece of fabric draped across her shoulders, a simple blanket Zane had tossed her way before retreating deeper into the base. For the first time since the ambush, she felt safe. Yet her thoughts swirled with uncertainty. Who was Zane? And why did he seem to know so much about her empire? A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She sat up straight as the door slid open with a quiet hiss. Zane entered, still wearing his helmet and tactical gear, a strange mix of familiarity and detachment in his posture. You've rested enough, Zane said without preamble. His voice, filtered through the helmet, was calm but carried an edge of urgency. We need to talk. Lyra crossed her arms, meeting his mirrored visor with defiance. Finally, I was beginning to think you enjoyed being mysterious. Zane didn't react to the sarcasm. He gestured for her to follow him. There are things you need to see, things your empire doesn't want you to know. Reluctantly, Lyra stood and followed him out of the room. The narrow corridors of the base felt colder now, the soft hum of distant machinery the only sound. They descended a winding staircase carved into the rock, emerging in what appeared to be a command center. The room was alive with holographic projections, maps, and blinking terminals, their glow casting eerie shadows on the walls. Zane stopped in front of a large hologram displaying a series of overlapping star charts. Your empire is at war, princess, but not just with rebels. Lyra frowned, stepping closer. What do you mean? The rebellion is the only active threat. Zane tapped a control panel, and the map shifted. Red and yellow markers lit up across dozens of systems, each one representing conflict zones, intercepted transmissions, and troop movements. These aren't rebel territories. These are contested zones, places where the empire is fighting. Something else. Lyra's breath hitched as she scanned the map. This can't be right. My father would have told me. Your father knows, Zane interrupted. But he hasn't told anyone outside his inner circle. The Empire is stretched thin, battling an enemy they can't understand. What enemy? Lyra demanded, her voice rising. Zane hesitated, then tapped another control. A new hologram appeared, this one showing a sleek alien ship unlike anything Lyra had seen before. Its design was elegant yet predatory, its surface shimmering as if alive. "They call themselves the Virak," Zane said. "They're not like us. Not like anyone your empire has encountered before. And they're winning." Lyra stared at the image, her heart pounding. The Virak ship seemed to radiate menace, even as a projection. "Why are you showing me this? What does it have to do with me?" Zane turned to face her, his helmet reflecting her troubled expression. "Because you need to understand the truth. The rebellion you're trying to negotiate with, they're not the real enemy. The Virak are. And the Empire is using the rebellion as a distraction, keeping the public focused on internal conflict while they lose the larger war." Lyra shook her head, stepping back. "No, that doesn't make sense. If this is true, why haven't we heard about it? Why hide something so important?" "Because your empire can't admit it's losing," Zane said, his voice sharp. "The Council would rather let entire systems fall than risk their reputation. They've turned people like you into pawns, sent into unwinnable battles to keep the illusion alive." Lyra clenched her fists, anger and disbelief surging within her. "How do you know all this? Who are you to make these accusations?" For the first time, Zane hesitated. He stepped closer, his helmet inches from her face. "I was part of it," he said quietly. "I was one of them, a strategist for the Council. I saw everything." Lyra froze. "You worked for the Empire?" "Once," Zane admitted, "until I saw what they were willing to do to protect their secrets. They betrayed their own people, soldiers, civilians, even you." The weight of his words settled heavily on her shoulders. She wanted to argue, to deny everything, but the conviction in Zane's voice was impossible to ignore. "Why are you telling me this now?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What do you want from me?" Zane turned back to the hologram, his hands clenched at his sides. "I don't want anything from you. But if you're going to survive, and if you want to change anything, you need to know the truth." Lyra stared at him, her mind racing. Zane was an enigma, a man with too many secrets and too much knowledge. But deep down, she felt he was telling the truth. The question was, could she trust him? "All right," she said finally, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. "Show me everything." Zane nodded, and the hologram shifted once more, revealing a deeper layer of the conflict Lyra had only just begun to understand. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: her life, and the fate of the Empire, would never be the same. The chase. The sudden blaring of alarms ripped through the stillness of the base, their piercing wail echoing off the rocky walls. Princess Lyra jolted from her seat at the central table, her heart pounding. Across the room, Zane's head snapped up, and his movements were immediate and precise. He was already at the control panel, scanning the holograms with practiced efficiency. "We've been found," he said grimly. Lyra rushed to his side, her voice sharp with urgency. "Found by who?" "The mercenaries." Zane shook his head, tapping several buttons to bring up the external cameras. A series of angular ships filled the screen, their black and red hulls glinting ominously as they descended toward the moon's surface. "No," he said quietly. "This is worse. Imperial hunters." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. She knew the name well. Imperial hunters were elite strike teams, dispatched only for the most critical missions. They were ruthless, relentless, and impossible to escape. "They track your escape," Zane continued, his voice low but steady. "And they're not here to negotiate." Before Lyra could respond, the ground beneath them trembled. Dust rained down from the cavern's ceiling as the sound of energy blasts reverberated through the base. Zane grabbed her arm, his grip firm but not harsh. "We need to move. Now." Lyra didn't argue. The urgency in his tone spurred her into action, and she followed him as he sprinted through the dimly lit corridors. The air grew thicker with the scent of burning metal as they passed sections of the base that had already been breached. "They're cutting through the defenses," Lyra shouted over the chaos. "How do we fight back?" "We don't," Zane replied, his voice calm despite the situation. "We escape." They burst into the hangar, where Zane's battered ship awaited. The once quiet refuge was now a battlefield. Sparks flew as sections of the ceiling collapsed, and the screech of grinding metal filled the air. Drones patrolled the upper levels, their searchlights scanning for targets. Zane didn't slow. He vaulted up the ramp of his ship, pulling Lyra with him. As soon as they were inside, he sealed the hatch and sprinted to the cockpit. Lyra followed, throwing herself into the co-pilot's seat. The ship's systems flickered to life, and the engines roared, shaking the vessel. "Buckle up," Zane said, his hands flying over the controls. The ship lifted off, its thrusters scorching the hangar floor as it rose toward the exit. But just as they neared the opening, a blast of red energy struck the side of the vessel, sending it careening to the left. Lyra screamed, gripping the armrests as the ship spiraled. "Hold on," Zane growled, wrestling with the controls. The ship stabilized, but Lyra could see the damage on the redouts. Shields at half power, hull integrity compromised. "They're trying to box us in," Lyra shouted, pointing to the view screen. The Imperial Hunter's ships were forming a perimeter, their weapons charging for another volley. Zane didn't hesitate. "Not if I can help it." He pushed the thrusters to maximum, aiming straight for the smallest gap in the enemy formation. The ship hurtled forward, dodging blasts with impossible precision. Lyra's stomach churned as the vessel spun and weaved, narrowly avoiding destruction at every turn. "How are you doing this?" she asked, her voice shaky with equal parts fear and awe. Zane's reply was curt. "Years of practice." A missile locked onto them, its red trail glowing ominously. Lyra's eyes widened as the alarm blared. "We're going to be hit." "Not yet," Zane said, slamming a button on the console. A series of decoy drones shot out from the ship, their signatures mimicking its movements. The missile veered off course, detonating harmlessly in the distance. But their escape wasn't over. The exit to the atmosphere loomed ahead, blocked by two massive hunter ships. Zane clenched his jaw, his hand steady on the controls. "They're not moving," Lyra said, panic creeping into her voice. "What do we do?" Zane didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached for a lever hidden beneath the console. Lyra noticed the markings beside it, worn and scratched, as though it had been used far too many times. "What's that?" she asked, her heart racing. "The only way out," Zane said simply. "Hold on tight." Before she could question him further, he pulled the lever. The ship shuddered violently, and the engines roared louder than ever. Lyra felt herself pressed back into her seat as the vessel surged forward with terrifying speed. The hunter ships opened fire, their beams slicing through space, but Zane's ship was already past them, disappearing into the swirling blue of hyperspace. For a moment, there was silence. The tension in the air was palpable as both of them caught their breath. Lyra stared at Zane, her mind racing with questions. "That wasn't just piloting," she said finally. "You knew exactly how they'd react. You knew how to outmaneuver them." Zane didn't respond immediately. His helmet turned slightly toward her, the mirrored visor reflecting her wide-eyed expression. "I told you," he said quietly. "I know how the Empire works. I helped build it." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. The implications of his words hit her like a shockwave. Zane wasn't just some rogue pilot. He was someone who had once stood at the heart of the Empire's power, and now he was running from it. As the ship glided through hyperspace, Lyra felt a strange mix of fear and trust. Whoever Zane truly was, one thing was clear. He wasn't just her rescuer. He was something much more dangerous. The hidden truth. The stillness of the ancient outpost was unsettling. Princess Lyra stepped cautiously through the towering archway, her footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. It was a stark contrast to the chaos of their escape just hours before. This place was unlike anything she'd seen, a forgotten relic of humanity's past, its walls carved with intricate symbols and glowing with faint, pulsating light. "What is this place?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Zane, standing ahead of her, didn't answer immediately. He was scanning the room with a small device, its soft hum blending with the ambient buzz of the outpost. Finally, he turned to face her, the light from the walls reflecting off his helmet. "A sanctuary," he said simply. "Or at least, it used to be." Lyra frowned, her eyes drawn to the symbols etched into the walls. Some of them looked familiar, as if she'd seen them in a history book long ago, but she couldn't place them. A sanctuary for who? Zane's voice was quiet, almost reverent. "Humans." Her brow furrowed. "But we're humans. This doesn't make any sense." Zane motioned for her to follow him deeper into the chamber. "Not humans like us. Humans who came before. The ones who built the foundation of the Empire." Lyra trailed behind him, her gaze darting to every corner of the massive space. The deeper they went, the more it felt like stepping back in time. Ancient consoles lined the walls, their screens flickering with strange glyphs. In the center of the chamber stood a large pedestal, its surface glowing with holographic projections. Lyra froze as she saw the image hovering above it, a map of the galaxy, but with territories marked in ways she didn't recognize. "What is this?" she asked, moving closer to the pedestal. Zane stepped beside her, his gloved hand brushing over the controls. The map shifted, zooming in on a cluster of systems at the edge of the galaxy. "This is the truth your empire has buried," he said, "the real history of humanity." Lyra stared at the map, her confusion growing. "What are you talking about?" "Humanity's history is well documented. We've expanded across the stars, built an empire that's lasted for centuries." Zane let out a bitter laugh, the sound distorted through his helmet. "The history you know is a lie. The empire wasn't built by expansion. It was built by conquest and betrayal." Lyra shook her head, taking a step back. "That's not possible. My family." "Your family inherited the spoils," Zane interrupted, his tone sharp. "But the empire itself was built on the backs of humans who were cast aside. Soldiers, scientists, entire colonies sacrificed to ensure the elite's survival." He tapped a command on the pedestal, and the hologram changed. It now displayed images, grainy but unmistakable, of massive ships locked in battle. The designs of some were familiar, like the Imperial fleet, but others were unlike anything Lyra had ever seen. Sleek, angular vessels with glowing cores, their weapons devastating entire planets. "This was the first conflict," Zane explained. "A war that nearly wiped out humanity. The Virak, the enemy your empire refuses to acknowledge, were there from the beginning. And when the war ended, the empire chose to rewrite history. They erased the sacrifices of those who fought and turned their victories into myths." Lyra's voice trembled with disbelief. "Why would they do that? Why hide something so important?" "Because the truth is dangerous," Zane said. "If people knew the price of the Empire's survival, they'd revolt. And if they knew the Virak are still out there, gaining strength, they'd panic." Lyra turned away, her mind racing. Everything Zane was saying contradicted everything she'd been taught. But the evidence was undeniable, glowing before her eyes. "How do you know all this?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Zane hesitated, and for a moment she thought he might refuse to answer. But then he reached up, his hands moving to the sides of his helmet. With a quiet hiss, he removed it, revealing his face for the first time. Lyra gasped. His features were sharp and weathered, his eyes piercing but haunted. But it wasn't his appearance that shocked her, it was the familiarity. She'd seen his face before, in the Empire's records and memorials. You're one of them," she whispered. "One of the heroes from the old stories." "But that's impossible," You'd be dead. Zane finished, his voice softer now. I should be. But the technology they used to save me, what was left of me, kept me alive. I was meant to protect the Empire. Instead, I saw its true nature. Lyra's knees felt weak, and she sank onto the pedestal's edge. Why save me? She asked, tears welling in her eyes. Why show me all this? Zane knelt in front of her, his expression unyielding. Because you still have a chance to change it. The Empire is crumbling under its lies, and the Virak are coming. If you don't act, everything your family built, everything humanity fought for, will be gone. Lyra stared at him, her mind torn between doubt and determination. The weight of his words pressed down on her, but she couldn't ignore the fire they ignited within her. Show me what to do, she said finally, her voice steady. I won't let this happen. Zane stood, offering her a hand. Then prepare yourself, princess. The truth is just the beginning. The revelation. The soft hum of the ship's engines filled the air, but inside the small cabin, the tension was electric. Lyra sat across from Zane, her mind racing as she replayed the events of the past few days. The revelations from the ancient outpost weighed heavily on her, and now, more than ever, she needed answers. The dim light of the cabin reflected off Zane's helmet, the man behind it still an enigma. You've told me about the Empire's lies, the Virak, and the hidden war, Lyra said, her voice calm but firm. But you've avoided one question. Who are you really? Zane sat motionless for a moment before leaning back in his chair. You already know more than most people in the galaxy, he said, his voice distorted through the helmet. Knowing who I am won't change anything. It changes everything. Lyra shot back. You know things no one else does. You've risked your life to save mine. And yet, you won't even show me your face. Why? Zane was silent for a long moment. Then, with a sigh, he reached up and pressed a release on his helmet. The hiss of decompressing seals echoed through the cabin, and Lyra held her breath as he removed the helmet, revealing his face. The moment their eyes met, Lyra's breath caught. His face was sharp and weathered, his dark eyes filled with a mixture of pain and resolve. But what struck her most was the familiarity. She had seen his face before, on statues, in textbooks, in the myths of her empire. You're not supposed to be alive, she whispered, her voice trembling. Zane's lips curled into a wry smile. That's what they wanted everyone to believe. Lyra stood abruptly, her mind reeling. You're Zane Varian, the hero of the siege of Solara. You died over a century ago. I didn't die, Zane said, his voice calm but heavy. Not completely. After the battle, I was left for dead. The Empire found me and used experimental technology to bring me back. But it wasn't to honor me or reward me. It was to turn me into something else, a weapon they could control. Lyra shook her head, struggling to process his words. But why? Why would they do that to one of their own heroes? Because I knew too much, Zane replied, his gaze steady. I saw the truth about the Virak, about the lengths the Empire would go to keep their power. They couldn't let me die, but they couldn't let me speak either. So they kept me alive, hidden, and under their control. And now? Lyra asked, her voice barely audible. Zane's expression hardened. I escaped. But not before they turned me into something I didn't recognize. The man you've read about in your history books. He's not who I am anymore. Lyra sat down slowly, her hands trembling. Why show me this now? Why reveal yourself to me? Because you're different, Zane said. I've watched your decisions, your willingness to negotiate peace, your refusal to play the Empire's games. You remind me of what I once believed the Empire could be, a force for good. But you can't change it if you don't know the truth. Lyra stared at him, her emotions swirling. You've risked everything to show me the truth. I don't know if I can live up to what you're asking of me. Zane leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers. You don't have to live up to anything. You just have to choose. Will you keep pretending the Empire is what it claims to be, or will you fight to make it what it should be? The weight of his words pressed down on her, but for the first time, she felt a spark of clarity. The Empire's corruption, the Virak threat, Zane's sacrifice, it all pointed to one undeniable truth. The galaxy needed a change, and it wouldn't come from anyone but her. She stood, her resolve hardening. "I'll fight," she said, her voice steady. "But I need your help." Zane nodded, his expression softening slightly. "You'll have it. But there's one more thing you need to know." Lyra's stomach tightened. "What is it?" Zane's eyes darkened. "The Virak aren't just coming for the Empire. They're coming for you. They know who you are, and they see you as a threat." The room fell silent, the weight of his words sinking in. Lyra clenched her fists, the spark of determination growing into a flame. If the Virak saw her as a threat, she would make sure they were right. The princess's choice. The air crackled with tension as Princess Lyra stood on the bridge of Zane's ship, staring out at the vastness of space. Ahead, the Imperial fleet loomed, a glittering armada of deadly precision. Behind them, the Virak ships gathered, their predatory designs glowing with ominous light. The stars themselves seemed to dim in the face of the impending battle. Zane stood beside her, his face grim but determined. "This is it, Princess," he said quietly. "The moment everything changes. You've seen the truth. Now it's time to decide. Will you stand with the Empire or stand for something greater?" Lyra clenched her fists, her heart pounding. The choices before her felt impossibly heavy. If she returned to the Empire, she could warn them of the Virak threat, try to rally her people, and restore order. But Zane had shown her the Empire's cracks, the lies and betrayals that had paved its path. Could she truly save something so broken? "Lyra," Zane said, his voice breaking through her thoughts, "whatever you choose, remember, you don't have to be what they expect you to be. You can be something better." She turned to face him, her resolve hardening. "Then it's time to show them what I've learned." The bridge of the Imperial flagship was silent as Lyra's face appeared on the main screen, her voice steady but resolute. "This is Princess Lyra of the Trian Empire. I'm calling for an immediate ceasefire." The assembled officers exchanged uneasy glances, unsure how to respond. Finally, Admiral Karen, a grizzled veteran with a reputation for loyalty to the throne, stepped forward. "Your Highness, we've received reports of your disappearance. How can we be sure this isn't a trick?" "You're right to be cautious," Lyra replied, her tone sharp. "But if you don't listen, you'll doom us all. The Virak are preparing to strike, and the Empire is not ready." Admiral Karen's face darkened. "We've handled threats before. The Empire is stronger than you think." "Is it?" Lyra countered. "Because the Empire I've seen is crumbling under its own weight. We've been fighting the wrong battles while ignoring the real enemy. That ends now." Her words hung in the air, a challenge to the Empire's pride. The officers murmured among themselves, and Karen's jaw tightened. "And what would you have us do, Princess? Surrender?" "No," Lyra said firmly. "We fight, but not as conquerors, not as manipulators. We fight as a united people. And if the Empire can't rise to that, then it doesn't deserve to survive." The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Karen nodded, his expression grim. "We'll hear you out." The battle began in chaos. The Virak ships surged forward, their weapons cutting through the Imperial fleet like blades through paper. But this time, Lyra and Zane were ready. Using the knowledge they had gathered, they coordinated the fleet's defenses, exploiting the Virak's weaknesses, and turning the tide. Lyra's voice echoed across the comms, steady and commanding. "Focus fire on their energy cores. Don't let them regroup." Zane, piloting his ship with unmatched precision, weaved through the battlefield, leading daring strikes that crippled the Virak forces. For the first time, the Empire fought as one, unified against a common threat. But the cost was high. Ships exploded in fiery bursts, lives lost in the void of space. Lyra felt each loss keenly, her heart heavy with the weight of leadership. Yet she pressed on, her determination unwavering. Hours later, the battlefield was quiet. The Virak ships, battered and broken, retreated into the darkness. The Imperial fleet, though victorious, was a shadow of its former self. Lyra stood on the bridge, her eyes fixed on the stars. Zane approached her, his expression unreadable. "You did it." "We did it," she corrected, turning to face him. "But this isn't over. The Virak will come back. And the Empire has to change." Zane nodded, his gaze steady. "Then change it." Lyra smiled, a small but genuine expression. "I will. But I'll need help." "You'll have it," Zane said simply. As the ship's engines hummed, preparing to return to Imperial space, Lyra looked out at the endless expanse before her. The galaxy was vast, filled with challenges she couldn't yet imagine. But for the first time, she felt ready to face them, not as a pawn of the Empire, but as its future. And this time, she would ensure the galaxy would never forget the sacrifices made to save it.